Hey guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week. So this week I had 15 comics. We go to least favorite to best pick of the week, and also just a little update. I did get the reviews up this week, even though New York Comic Con is also this week. So I'll be there from Thursday to Sunday. A lot of good coverage there. Check out my stuff on Newsarama. Then, of course, on my channel as well. So be sure to check that out. Really excited. And I'll definitely have some videos up for you guys. But let's get started. Number 15 for me this week is SpiderVerse issue 1. For some reason, I got kind of like a bent issue, and I didn't notice it until I got home. But, yeah, so the cover is all looking like the movie, and even in the back, they mentioned the movie. It's like, hey, we wanted to do something because of Into the Spider-Verse, and what got me confused, I'm like, is this in the world of Into the Spider-Verse, or is it just a one-shot type deal? And honestly, especially with the artwork, it doesn't feel like anything like the movie, and that was the biggest disappointment. I wanted the artwork to look like this cover, because that's what was unique about Spider-Verse. But really, it just looks like your plain old Miles Morales book. He's jumping into different universes. It's something we've seen a billion times, because we're already had 2 Spider-Verse series in the past 5 years. We've had a lot of crossovers with these characters, so I didn't really need this book, and it seems like every issue is just going to have a random spider person he's going to meet, and there's just no cohesiveness to the story at all. I don't quite know why it exists. He's just jumping back and forth from realities. So, wasn't a fan of this one, even though I was super excited for this issue, and I probably won't get the next one, sadly. And I love the Spider-Verse movies. Obviously, I love Spider-Man, but Spider-Verse movie is probably my favorite movie of all time. So I was like, oh, that's so cool that Marvel's doing something with it. And they're not. So, yeah, I think you could definitely skip this one. I'm giving that 1.5 stars. I think it's really just banking on the title of Spider-Verse and not really delivering on it. So moving on to number 14, which is Batman issue 80. We are getting closer to the end of King's Run. And honestly, the big thing that I did not like about this issue is Romita Jr.'s artwork. I'm not a fan of his art style. It's very bulky for me. And especially because usually Batman's art collaborators are mind-blowing and cinematic, and especially as we get towards the end of this series, I expected a little bit of neater artwork. And even though I do think this is some of Romita Jr.'s better art, I'm just not a fan. It's not my cup of tea. But the story, on the other hand, is also a bit slow, which is why it's on the bottom. But I do like kind of the creepiness, I guess, of Catwoman and Batman coming back to Gotham and creeping their way in and dealing with these villains. And then we have Thomas Wayne going up against the Bat family, so we'll see what happens there. I guess the little moment I enjoyed the most here was his relationship with Gotham Girl and how he kind of treats her as a daughter and kind of replacing her with what he wants with Bruce. So I like that aspect, but it's such a small little glimmer of a very slow story arc that I feel like has lost steam a long time ago. So hopefully it picks up steam in the next couple issues, but I wasn't completely impressed with this one. So I'm going to give that 2 stars, and that is number 14. Moving on to number 13, which is, this has honestly surprised me, because this has been in my top 5 for a couple of weeks now, or, a couple times it's come out, and that's Fantastic Four issue 15. I really enjoyed the last issue. It was them reminiscing about the old days and saying, hey, let's do that mission we never could, and that was their first mission going into space. So with this one, they meet a group of heroes from another planet, I gather, and we learn more about those other heroes in the Fantastic Four, which I think was the determinant of this, is that half the issue is not about the Fantastic Four, it's about these other heroes, which is fine, but I never felt connected to them. It's a very sci-fi adventure, which is obviously Fantastic Four, but it felt weird because the last issue, and honestly this whole series, has just been really emotional about the family. So going into this more high-end kinetic action felt out of place for me. So I just didn't really feel invested in this story, and I just want to go back to the Fantastic Four. Obviously, I'll read the next issue, see where the art goes, but I was a little thrown off with this one. And I didn't even take out my iPad at all for this yet. So I gave this 2 stars, and that is number 13. I love the MJ cover, though, so I'm glad those are back. They're always my favorite. So moving on to number 12, which is another one I'm really disappointed by because this was my pick of the week when it came out, and that is Marvel Comics issue 1001. So what I loved about that first book is that it didn't really feel like it was a cash grab. It very much felt like it was celebrating Marvel. There's a lot of stories I enjoyed there, and here it just felt like the leftovers, you know? There's no numbers on them. They're just like, all right, here's Squirrel Girl, here's Miles. You like it? So, and then you get a little bit from the Masked Raider, who's this new villain that we're going to get in the next coming year. So that was cool, I guess, but it's just 2 pages. I think everything else was pretty fillerish, and honestly, I didn't enjoy the stories as much as those previous ones, maybe because we didn't have the timestamp on it like we did the previous series. It just felt like it didn't have much of a direction. There were 3 stories I liked, though. One being, of course, the Kitty Pryde one. If I can find it, I'll show it to you. But it's her just trying to recruit one of these mutants, and I felt like that was very reminiscent of what she went through and how the X-Men helped her. So I thought that was cool. I did like that the Power Pack had their own section. That was awesome. And I like that we got to see Katie and Jack because we haven't seen them in a really long time. We don't really know what they're up to, so it's kind of cool to see at least one panel with them. So I like that. I thought that was cool. And then the other favorite was just the kind of glittery people of the X-Men trying to defeat Emma. I thought that was a lot of fun. So those are the 3 I really enjoyed. Everything else is just like, eh. And still no Spider-Gwen. I'm shocked by that. At least we got Miss Marvel and Miles, but they were in the same story and more of a champion story than their own. I still feel like these are characters that should be celebrated. They're, you know, especially those 3, one of the biggest Marvel characters that were invented in the past decade, so it's kind of weird not to see them celebrated a little bit more, but overall I gave this 2.5 stars. I was pretty disappointed with it. I don't think you really need to get this one. I say just stick with issue 1000. I like 3 of the stories in here, and that's kind of it. So, like I said, giving that 2.5 stars, and that is number 12. Alright, moving on to number 11. This has been lower for me, sadly, and that's Bettie Page, the Halloween Special, issue 1. It just doesn't feel like this book has a direction anymore. It's kind of the same thing over and over again, and the stories were fine. You know, it's Bettie going up against this werewolf guy, and obviously you have the investigative part of that. And then I did like the story where Bettie and her friend end up going to a movie premiere about aliens, and then they go up against aliens. But again, is it that memorable? No, and the big thing is it was $4.99. It was pretty pricey for the story we ended up getting, even though we did get a couple more pages out of the deal. So overall, I'm going to give that 2.5 stars. And the artwork wasn't as strong as it usually is either, especially the line work for that first book. I guess because they're trying to make it a little bit grittier. I felt like it was just too plain. Didn't have a lot of... I didn't love the pencil work, honestly. I felt like the line work could have been a little bit neater there. But yeah, I'm going to give that 2.5 stars, and that is number 12? Number 11? Yeah, that was number 11. Moving on to number 10, which is Young Justice, issue 9. So this issue, I actually liked the previous issue, and I've liked the series overall. I want to love this series, but I just like it right now. I do think it's one of the better Bendis books, and I do have more of a past with these characters, because I love them as Teen Titans, and I loved Young Justice, the 90s version, and obviously the cartoon too, but with this story, it introduces Teen Lantern and who the hell she is, but it took 9 issues to get there. There's no build up to why we're learning about Teen Lantern's story. It's just kind of there. And then by the end, you're also still dealing with the multiverse stuff that we had from the previous issues. And it's like, okay, first we get to see Teen Lantern, and now this, and it just felt like a weirdly placed issue. Just because we needed to hear Teen Lantern's origins, because, like, I guess we should know this. And then also I feel like Teen Lantern, even though she had an interesting premise that she doesn't really have a lantern ring, it's some other technology, she doesn't quite have a voice. There's no personality there for me besides like, oh, you know, I'm a little kid, you know? I do think they try to bring some trauma in, like any hero, and I condone them for that, but I need more. I need a little bit more personality, especially when you compare it to, you know, Bendis' other launches. Obviously, Jessica Jones and Miles, they all have very different voices. I would even say Riri, especially with that first issue. I really enjoyed her voice, and I think she's grown as a character as her series and other writers have written her. But yeah, I just want to see a bit more from Teen Lantern and know why exactly she's been created for this book, because I still don't understand why. Artwork is good though. I enjoyed the art overall, but just don't really love the new characters of this book. Kind of wish they just stuck around with the characters we know. I don't really care about Jen Hex or Teen Lantern as of right now. So giving that 2.5 stars, and that is number 10. All right, moving on to number 9. Promise this is the last 2.5 star book. It was somewhat of a weak week for me. And that is Deathstroke issue 48. And Deathstroke, I like this book so much more when it has nothing to do with Deathstroke. And I know that's weird to say, but I think the kids are so much more interesting. And this has become a family book. And we get to see the ex-wife. We get to see Jericho. We get to see Rose. And I like them a lot more, which is why I've been liking this arc. And then you get to see this pushed Year of the Villain storyline with Deathstroke, where it really takes you out of the family dynamic that you know and love. And that's the moments I like. I like when Rose is interacting with Jericho's ex-fiance. I thought that was cool. I even like the ending where Deathstroke's interacting with his ex-wife. I thought that was cool. But all the Year of Villain stuff, I was totally bored by. And I'm like, all right, where's this going? We only have 2 issues left. And then the end gives us this cliffhanger again with Year of the Villain, with the agreement that Jericho made with Lex. And the bottom says Jericho issue 1. When is Jericho issue 1 coming out? There is no series announced unless I missed something. And then is it going to be a replacement title for Deathstroke? I thought the series was ending with issue 50. I am so confused of what this Jericho issue 1 is. So I gave that 2.5 stars, even though the artwork as always is really crisp and great and good action. The story wasn't great for me. All right, moving on to number 8. We're in the 3-star land now. Don't worry, guys. Number 8 for me is Champions, issue 10. So this is the last issue of Champions, a book that has been just kind of okay for me, and I can understand why the sales have been kind of low for this one. But I liked the Champions. You know, that's always what I've enjoyed, is the dynamic between the core team. So, especially Viv and Riri. I like their interaction. I thought they were the shining moment of this series, as they kind of forgive each other for what happened after they ignored each other after Viv kissed Riri and really didn't know how to feel about that. So that happened. I still wish there was more panel time to deal with it, but I like those moments. I like that, you know, Nova is dealing with him having his helmet again, his friends coming back together, so that was cool. The thing I don't like is kind of like the gun-ho, like, we're kids, we're the next, we're the future, I would say. And it just kind of felt a little bit too on the nose. And it's like, does every teen book have to do that? I feel like, can't they just be teens without saying they're teens? I think those are the better teen books, is when it's just organic. So Champions, for me, it was an okay issue. I do feel like that this series probably had more to tell, and that's why it just kind of feels like it ends abruptly and more of like an action issue than an emotional issue. But I think it did as much as it could, and I will follow the Champions where they go and hope that we get a Young Avengers series in its replacement. But Champions issue 10 gets 3 stars, and that is number 9. Moving on to number 8. Oh, that was number 8. I'm sorry. I'm losing count on numbers. That was number 8. We're moving on to number 7, which this is higher than usual, so that's cool. House of X issue 6. And we're finally really getting to the meat of the story. And we're getting to see how the mutants don't give a shit about humans anymore. They're like, let's create our own paradise, and things are going okay. But in the background, they did some of the Sabretooth here, so things might not be so okay as we all think. So even though they think this is going to be a good future, you know there's going to be a lot of drama and a lot of different headspaces. Even though right now everyone has the same dream, I don't think that's what's going to continue. And that's what I kind of like, is that it looks like they're in bliss right now, and it's all going to shatter. You know, it's the X-Men. It's going to shatter. The artwork was okay for me. I do think it's not as emotion-driven as some of the artwork we've seen in the past with this series. It just kind of felt a little stilted, but overall, I liked it, and I thought this was a pretty cool political issue, and I thought there were some good emotions throughout, especially Professor Xavier just kind of making his flip of his ideologies and agreeing to Magneto and these kind of horrible, not that Magneto's horrible, but these other X-Men, they're kind of horrible, like Apocalypse, and they're all sharing the table and having their own paradise. So we'll see how that works out, and I gave it 3.5 stars. I thought it was a pretty good ending to House of X, and good movement for the series. And I think we have one more left. I think we still have Powers of X issue 6. So we'll see how that leads us into X-Men issue 1. Alright, moving on to number 6, I believe. And that is DCeased issue 5. Yeah, actually higher than I thought, especially when I was beginning to read the issue. I'm like, oh yeah, this is kind of the same thing we're always seeing with this book. And, that's still been my issue with DCeased, is that feels like any other zombie story, feels like any other post-apocalyptic story, and I don't think it has as much personality as Injustice did, but there are some good moments in here. Lois punching Lex Luthor was kind of cool, but then I think the gut punch that led it to be a bit higher was Superman being infected, Flash being infected, Martian Manhunter being infected. It's all in like a switch. It happens very quickly. So I enjoyed that aspect. I thought that was good and some good action and emotion there. So overall, I'll give it 3.5 stars. Still not my favorite series, and I do think it's semi-forgettable, but I think there's some still good emotional moments if you're still reading it. So DCeased issue 5 gets 3.5 stars, and that was one of the better issues of the series. Moving on to number 5. Number 5 for me is The Immortal Hulk, issue 24. So, I love this book, as you guys know, and this issue is a little bit of a slower issue, but a necessary slow burn, as we get to see Immortal Hulk, and slow as, there's still a lot of action, but I meant plot-wise. I think the reason why I say it's slow, I think there's a lot thrown at you that you still need to digest. So, by the end of the issue, we get to see Hulk take over the Shadow Base, pretty much. He's the head of the Shadow Base by the end, and there's a lot of battling, there's a lot of transferring into the Hulk zone, we'll call it, because people are dying, and we get to see that general guy, he dies, and you see his connection to the Hulk a bit more. And then in the end, you have this kind of ominous person to lead us to the future that might bring some more cosmic aspect to Hulk, and it kind of brings that mirror aspect as well of there's two people there. And what does Bruce see? What does the Hulk see? So I think that was pretty cool. And the artwork, as always, is haunting and great. There's actually like a whole entire scene where Hulk doesn't have a mouth. And the dialogue plays off of that he can't pronounce certain letters. So I thought that was cool. And yeah, overall, it was a good issue that I think is going to bring us a lot of promising story for the future. Especially as Hulk as head of the Shadow Base, it looks like, or king of the Shadow Base. So I'm going to give that 3.5 stars, and that is number 5. Moving on to number 4, which is also Immortal Hulk, and that is Absolute Carnage, Immortal Hulk issue 1, which I actually thought was a mini-series. It's only a one-shot, which brings this down a little bit, but I still like the issue because of the story. I like that we really get to see Bruce's head throughout a lot of the events we've already seen in Immortal Hulk, especially between Bettie, which I love. I enjoyed that and their complicated relationship, and finding out that Thunderbolt Ross is alive, and Bettie's like, all right, I'm gonna go. I don't want to deal with this right now. So we get to see the emotions of that and how that connects to Absolute Carnage, because part of that alien symbiote is with Ross. And by the end of Absolute Carnage issue 3, we get to see that Hulk's solution is to get the Venom symbiote. So we do get to see how we got to that moment. Now, the reason this wasn't higher, because I thought the story was really good, the art. I didn't quite like it. I got it. It's creepy. It's like, I think kind of like very psychological in some ways. It feels a little bit trippy, and I like that, but I also just don't like it. As a style preference, I feel like their faces are really thin and almost like triangular, so I thought that was weird. But yeah, like this, the proportions are really strange, but again, I think that's like the point. It's in your head. I don't think proportions should be right, so maybe it's the perfect fit, but I just don't really like it. Like, even when we got to see Bettie for the first time, like, her face looks like it's a triangle going into itself. Let me see if I can find it. Like, over here. The portions are just really weird for this book, but I guess it works. So overall, I'm going to give that 3.5 stars. I thought it was definitely worth picking up if you're reading, honestly, either Absolute Carnage or Immortal Hulk. I think they continue both stories really well. So moving on to number 3, and that is Future Foundation issue 3. My favorite cover of the week is this MJ just floating around with her headphones on with the rest of the Future Foundation. I thought that was pretty cool. I had to grab that cover. But with this issue, we get to learn a little bit about Ricky Barnes, and the reason why it's higher is because I like that they're exploring the multiverse, especially stuff that happened with Secret Wars and how that's related to the Future Foundation and the Fantastic Four. So I like that, and I also liked Ricky and Julie. I know Julie was unconscious for most of it, but I thought they definitely had potential of chemistry. And I thought the awkwardness of Ricky was cool. And I liked learning a bit more about what happened to her after Young Allies, because it's been a while. But I also feel like it's really exposition heavy, and that's something that this book has faltered on. It's just a lot of explaining. So that I think there could have been a little less of, but I enjoyed the stuff they were explaining about. So, I mean, it sucks that this has already got canceled. It's only going to be a 5-issue series, so I hope it ends well. But I had fun with it. I think it's a fun series. I like the power pack, so I'm going to give that one 3.5 stars, and that is number 3. Alright, moving on to number 2, a book I honestly wasn't even going to pick up because I didn't know about it. And we started our new segment for our podcast on Comic Frontline, Comic Book Weekly, where we pick out big books. So I looked through the list a little bit further than what I normally would, because I'm like, alright, let's see what indies have big books coming out. And I'm a big Gerry Duggan fan, and he came up with Deadeyes issue 1 this week, and I read the description, and I'm like, that sounds pretty cool. And I really liked it. This book is about... I feel like it's somewhat of a commentary on, like, our nostalgia and 90s comics, too, hidden in there. But it's about this old kind of anti-hero, Deadeyes, who, you know, killed people. And the stories have been all mixed in the media, who has retired. His wife is sick, it seems. We don't really know what has happened to his wife. She's in a wheelchair. Did they used to work together? Kind of implied that they did. So maybe she also was part of this, which I would love to learn. And then... our hero or our anti-hero goes back into it. He works for this like Walmart, and he sees this guy buying objects that is obvious that he's killed someone, and he gets the information to go to his house, and he finds out there's kids there, and he obviously gets really upset, and he kills these people, and the wife finds out about it, has a seizure, and then by the end of the issue, you get maybe the old villains that were part of Deadeyes past. And I really liked this issue a lot. I thought this was really good. I was not issue 1, but from the few pages that you read in the beginning, like the first 5 pages, I'm like, dude, I love this guy's voice. Honestly, it reminds me a lot of like Kill or Be Killed type story. The Violence that came out a couple of years ago kind of has that vibe to it. And I love both of those books a lot. And the artwork is just gritty enough. And it definitely got me in. And I totally gonna read the next issue. Actually, as I mentioned before, I'm going to New York Comic Con this week. And gonna probably pick up the physical version of it, even though I already read it digitally. I'm gonna get the physical version as well and officially put it on my physical pull list, so that's gonna be cool. And yeah, I really enjoyed this one, and I hope it continues to be this good, because I thought it was a really unique story. So, and a unique perspective on vigilantism. So I'm gonna give that 4.5 stars, and that is number 2. Moving on to number 1, this is actually really hard because I was debating between Deadeyes and Runaways, but I picked Runaways because obviously I have a lot of a connection to these characters, so that's kind of how I outweighed it, because they both felt very, not the same type of story, but I enjoyed both of them to a similar degree. So with this issue, we get to see issue 25. It's a landmark issue, and things happen. We get to see this guy, Doc Justice, who's been a superhero in Los Angeles for a long time and knows the Pride, is like fanboying over our Runaways, and he's like, hey, I can help you out. And then, of course, when Carolina's trying to do the right thing, she brings this construction crew and, like, people knowing where they live because she's a superhero. Now everyone, like, wants to know who this new superhero is and kind of figures out it's Carolina, or at least figure out where she lives. So now they're on the run again, and I thought that was just the perfect way to end the landmark issues. Of course, the Runaways have to run away. And as much as I hate seeing Carolina in pain, I do love, the one thing she tries to do to be a good person kind of screws up a lot of things, even though she's just trying to do the right thing. And I think the emotional beats that our artist does here is so good, especially towards the end. You get some kind of comedic moments as Carolina's also crying, it's definitely hard. I also like some of the small Molly jokes. I feel like it's been a while since we've seen her spunk, so that was cool. I think my only nitpick is that some of it felt a little cartoonier than others because there was a different colorist for half the book. So I think with the new colors, it felt a little bit more cartoonier than the Matthew Wilson colors that we normally have for this book. But man, overall, I really like this book, obviously, and I thought this was a really fun direction to take our heroes to actually be superheroes. So where is that going to go, and where are they going to run away to? So, and is Doc Justice to be trusted? He's an adult, guys. Have we learned anything? I don't know. So we'll have to see and hopefully learn more about his past as well. So overall, I'm going to give out 4.5 stars. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know in the comments below all your thoughts on the comics this week. And of course, every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time is Comic Book Weekly, where we discuss our favorite comics and comic book news. So be sure to check that out. Check out my Twitter and Facebook, and go check out my comics like Father Like Daughter, and They Call Her the Dancer. Thank you guys, and I will see you next week and for all that New York Comic Con coverage. Bye guys.